"Make it fast, chief. I won't beg," he said. But the Apache chief saw something else in him. The sun had barely risen, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and gold, when a lone figure appeared on the horizon. He moved quickly but cautiously, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. The land was vast and empty, stretching endlessly in all directions. There were no trees, no streams, only dry earth, scattered rocks, and the occasional tumbleweed rolling lazily across the sand. He stopped for a moment to catch his breath, wiping the sweat from his brow. His clothes were torn and dusty, and his hands bore scratches from the rough terrain. He looked exhausted, but there was a fire in his eyes that made it clear he would not stop. In the distance he saw smoke curling into the sky. At first he thought it might be a campfire left by travelers, but as he got closer he realized it was more organized. An encampment of some sort. He knew immediately that it was an Apache settlement. He had heard stories about the Apache people, their courage, their loyalty to their own, and their fierce skill in defending their lands. Some feared them and some respected them, but everyone knew they did not tolerate weakness or deceit. He straightened his back and tightened his worn belt. His voice, hoarse from shouting and from the dry wind, called out as he approached, "Make it fast, chief! I won't beg!" There was a sharp edge in his tone, a mix of desperation and pride. His words were loud enough to carry across the camp, but not threatening. He wanted the chief to know he was serious, that he had come on his own terms. The Apache warriors stirred as they heard him. A few stepped out from the shadows of the tents, their eyes narrowing as they studied the newcomer. They had seen strangers before, some lost, some deceitful, some harmless. This man was different. There was something in his posture, the way he held his head, and the determination in his eyes that made them pause. He was not a man who would beg or plead for mercy. That much was clear. High on a ridge overlooking the camp, the Apache chief watched silently. His face was calm and unreadable, but his mind was alert. He had learned long ago not to judge a man solely by his words. Words were easy, actions revealed the truth. "Ah!" The stranger's voice had reached him, and while the words were bold, the chief noticed the tremor of fatigue, the slight hesitation in the man's movements, and the subtle way he scanned the area for danger. The chief recognized that beneath the defiance there was fear, quiet, controlled, but real. The man lowered his hands slightly, not in surrender, but in a small gesture of respect. He took a few more steps and stopped at the edge of the camp. The warriors around him were tense, their hands resting near their weapons, ready to act if needed. He could feel their eyes on him, weighing every move, every breath. He forced himself to meet their gaze evenly, showing neither fear nor aggression. "I've come to speak with your chief," he said. "I have no quarrel with you. I only ask for a moment of his time." A young warrior, tall and strong, stepped forward. His face was serious, but not unkind. "The chief sees everything," he said. "If he wishes to speak with you, he will come. But know this, we watch carefully. One false move, and there will be consequences." The man nodded slowly. He understood. He was not asking for favors. He was asking for an opportunity. That was all he needed. He had no illusions about his situation. If the Apache found him deceitful, they would not hesitate to act. But he had no intention of hiding anything. The truth, as dangerous as it might be, was the only path he could take. Time passed slowly as he waited. The wind carried the scent of burning wood and dry earth. Birds circled in the distance. and the faint sound of hooves echoed far away. The man could feel the sun climbing higher in the sky, warming his back and drying the sweat on his skin. Despite the harsh conditions, he did not move from his spot. He stayed calm, keeping his eyes on the ridge, knowing that the chief was watching him, waiting, deciding. Finally, a figure emerged from the shadows of the tents. The chief was a tall man with strong features, his eyes deep and thoughtful. He moved with a quiet confidence that demanded respect. He stopped a few steps away from the stranger and studied him silently. The man returned the gaze, steady and unwavering. There was no fear in his eyes, only determination. The chief spoke at last, his voice calm but commanding. "You have come far, stranger. Tell me why." The man took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I have nowhere else to go," he said simply. "I am not asking for charity. I am not asking for forgiveness. I only ask for a chance to prove myself, to show that I mean no harm to your people." The chief did not respond immediately. Instead, he looked past the man, observing his movements, the way he shifted his weight, the way his hands twitched slightly as if ready for anything. The chief had seen many men claim courage, only to falter when faced with a test. This man was different. There was something in his eyes, something raw and honest, that spoke of both fear and strength. The stranger noticed the chief's gaze and felt a strange mix of pride and anxiety. He knew that this moment could determine his future. If he failed to impress the chief, he could be turned away, or worse. But he also knew that showing weakness now would be a mistake. He straightened his back, lifted his chin, and met the chief's eyes with steady determination. "I will do whatever is needed," he said. "I will not beg. I will not lie. I only ask that you see who I am through my actions." The chief's eyes narrowed slightly, as if measuring the truth in the man's words. He could sense the tension in the camp, the way the warriors were waiting for his decision. Yet he did not rush. He had learned that patience often revealed more than haste. Sometimes the bravest actions were shown not in words, but in restraint, in thoughtfulness, in quiet observation. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The desert was quiet except for the occasional whisper of wind and the soft murmur of the camp. The stranger felt the weight of every eye upon him, every silent judgment, every expectation. He felt his heart beating faster, but he controlled his breathing, grounding himself in the moment. He had faced danger before, but this was different. This was not a battle of weapons. It was a battle of trust, a test of character that could not be won by force alone. Finally, the chief nodded slightly, a small motion that carried immense meaning. He was not offering safety, not yet, but he was acknowledging the stranger's presence, his courage, and perhaps a hint of potential. The man understood the silent message. He was not yet accepted, but he was being seen. And in the eyes of the Apache chief, being seen was the first step toward respect. The man lowered his voice, speaking more to himself than anyone else. "I will not fail," he whispered. The words were simple, but full of determination. The chief heard them, or perhaps he felt them. Either way, he recognized the truth in the statement. This was a man who would face trials, who would endure hardship, who would not bow to fear, and that, above all, was something worth noticing. As the sun rose higher, the stranger remained at the edge of the camp, waiting for the chief's next move. Around him, the Apache warriors returned to their daily routines, though their eyes still lingered on him from time to time. They did not yet know what to make of him, but they sensed the tension and the possibility. Something unusual had entered their midst, something that could either bring danger or opportunity. The man adjusted his cloak against the heat and dust, keeping his gaze steady. He knew that patience was part of this test, that every moment of waiting was a chance to show strength through composure, and in that quiet, tense morning, a silent understanding began to form between him and the chief, a recognition that actions would speak louder than words, and that courage could take many forms, sometimes hidden beneath layers of fear, pride, and desperation. For the first time in a long while, the man felt a small spark of hope. The chief had seen him, and that meant there was a chance, however slim, that he could find a place, a purpose, or at least a moment of understanding in a world that had been harsh and unforgiving. He took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and waited, ready for whatever came next, knowing that this moment might shape the rest of his life. The chief did not speak immediately. He remained still, his eyes fixed on the stranger, studying every movement, every subtle shift of weight, every flicker of emotion. Around him, the camp was alive with quiet activity. Warriors sharpened their weapons, women prepared food, and children played near the tents. The stranger watched them all, noticing the harmony and rhythm of the camp. There was an order here, a sense of belonging that he had rarely seen in his life. It was not the chaos he had expected, but a quiet strength that ran through every person and every action. Finally, the chief spoke, his voice low but clear. "You claim to have no quarrel with us, yet you enter our land alone. You come with bold words, but bold words alone do not prove your intentions. Why should I believe you?" The stranger straightened, his jaw tightening. He could feel the eyes of the entire camp upon him. One wrong word, one gesture out of place, and he could ruin any chance he had here. He drew a steadying breath. "I understand," he said. "I do not expect your trust easily. I do not ask for mercy. I ask only for a chance to show my intentions through action. If you choose not to believe me, I will accept it. But I will not hide or run. I have come this far because I have no other choice." The chief's gaze did not waver. He had heard such words before. Many men spoke boldly when they were frightened. Many tried to mask fear with pride. But he saw something in this man that was unusual. Honesty. True, unpolished honesty. There was no attempt to manipulate, no over-exaggeration, no false courage. He had risked everything simply by walking into the camp and declaring his intentions. That in itself was proof of character. A few warriors stepped closer, curious. One of them, a young man with dark hair and sharp eyes, spoke up. "He says he will not beg, yet he asks for something from us. Does this not make him weak?" The chief did not answer immediately. He allowed the words to hang in the air, letting each person consider their meaning. Strength, he knew, was not always shown through aggression or defiance. Sometimes it was shown in humility, in the ability to seek help without losing pride. He turned his gaze back to the stranger. "Walk with me," the chief said at last. He moved slowly through the camp, and the stranger followed. As they walked, the chief watched how he moved, how he reacted to the environment, and how he observed the people around him. Every glance, every shift in posture revealed more than words ever could. "You have come far, and you carry yourself with courage," the chief said after a while. "But courage alone does not define a man. Character is measured by choices. Tell me, stranger, what kind of choices have brought you here?" The stranger's steps slowed. He considered his words carefully. "I have faced men who would take everything from me," he said. "I have been forced to fight, to run, to make decisions I did not want to make. but I have always tried to do what I believed was right, even when it was difficult. I have learned that pride can save a man, but it can also destroy him if it is not guided by honesty." The chief nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. He could see the truth in the man's eyes. Many people claimed to be honorable in the face of danger, but few lived it. This man had survived, not through cunning alone, but through choices that required integrity and courage. That was rare. They reached a small clearing at the edge of the camp. The sun was higher now, casting long shadows across the ground. The chief turned to face the stranger fully. "You ask for a chance," he said. "A chance is not given lightly. You must show that your intentions are pure, that your heart is steady, and that your courage is real. Words are not enough. Only actions can prove a man's worth." The stranger nodded. "I understand. I am ready for whatever you require of me." The chief studied him for a long moment, then spoke with quiet authority. "There is a matter that requires attention. A group of horses was taken by a rival band. These horses are important to our people. I do not send you to fight them, but to recover what is ours. You must move with care, not recklessness. You must prove your intelligence as well as your courage. Only then will we know if your words hold truth." The stranger's eyes widened slightly, but only for a moment. He had faced danger before, but this was different. It was not a simple battle of strength. It was a test of character, intelligence, and restraint. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "I will do it," he said firmly. "I will not fail you." The chief nodded. "You leave at sunrise tomorrow. Tonight, you rest and observe. Learn our ways, understand our people, and prepare yourself. A man who knows the land, the people, and the consequences of his actions will succeed. One who rushes blindly will fail." As they returned to the center of the camp, the stranger noticed the curious eyes of the warriors. Some were suspicious, some intrigued, and some simply indifferent. He understood that earning their respect would take time, and that this first task was only the beginning. He also noticed how the people interacted with one another, how they communicated without unnecessary words, how they worked together in harmony, and how they carried themselves with quiet strength. There was a discipline here that fascinated him. That evening, the stranger sat near the fire, watching the camp come alive with activity. He listened to the stories of the elders, the laughter of the children, and the quiet conversations of the warriors. He realized that this was more than a community. It was a way of life. Every action, every decision, was guided by principles he had rarely seen outside of stories. He felt a mixture of awe and humility. As night fell, he prepared himself for the journey ahead. He checked his belongings, made sure his small supplies were ready, and went over what he knew of the rival band. He could feel the weight of the chief's expectations, but he did not falter. Courage, he reminded himself, was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. That night he could not sleep easily. Thoughts of the mission, of the challenges ahead, and of the people who had already begun to watch him swirled in his mind. But he also felt a strange sense of belonging, even though he was a stranger in their midst. He realized that being seen and acknowledged, even without full trust, was a powerful thing. It gave him purpose and a chance to prove not only his abilities, but also his character. At dawn, the chief approached him again. The sky was a pale blue, the first rays of sunlight illuminating the camp. "The journey begins now," he said. "Go with care, go with respect, and remember that every choice matters. Your actions will speak louder than any words you could say." The stranger nodded, feeling a mix of anticipation and nervousness. He bowed slightly in respect, then turned toward the path that would lead him to the stolen horses. Each step felt heavy with responsibility, but light with determination. He knew that this was the first true test of his journey, and that how he handled it would shape not only how the chief saw him, but also how he saw himself. As he moved through the desert, leaving the camp behind, he reflected on the lessons he had already learned in such a short time. Courage was necessary, but wisdom was more important. Pride could be powerful, but humility guided strength. And honesty, even when difficult, revealed the truest measure of a man. He felt the desert wind on his face, the rough ground beneath his boots, and the endless sky above him. He was alone, yet not entirely, for the eyes of the chief and the camp followed him in a quiet, invisible way. The days stretched on as he navigated the rocky terrain, moving with caution, observing signs of life, and thinking ahead. He knew the rival band would not be easy to approach, and he would have to rely on both his wits and his courage. But he was ready. Every lesson, every glance from the chief, every moment of observation had prepared him for this. As the sun climbed higher, he spotted a faint trail in the sand, fresh hoofprints leading toward a distant ridge. His heart quickened. He had found the right path, but he moved carefully, remembering the chief's words. Act with respect, act with intelligence, and let your choices guide you. One misstep could ruin everything. By the time the sun reached its peak, he had grown more confident in his direction. He paused occasionally to rest, drink water, and plan his next move. He thought about the camp he had left behind, about the chief's gaze, and about the quiet trust he had been given, even before proving himself fully. It was a strange and humbling feeling, and it strengthened his resolve. As the day drew to a close, he reached the base of a ridge where he knew the rival band's presence would be stronger. The air was tense, the shadows long, and every sound seemed amplified. He crouched low, moving silently, aware that observation and patience were now more important than speed. The true test was about to begin, and in that quiet, tense evening, he understood something essential. Courage alone would not carry him through. He would need patience, wisdom, and respect for those around him. Every choice mattered. Every action spoke. And the eyes of the Apache chief were still upon him, invisible but powerful, guiding him in ways he could not yet fully understand. The ridge loomed ahead like a wall of jagged stone, its sharp edges casting long shadows over the desert floor. The stranger moved carefully, keeping low and silent, every step calculated. The sun was dipping toward the horizon, painting the sky in warm shades of orange and pink, but the beauty of the moment did nothing to calm his nerves. His heart pounded, each beat reminding him that he was walking into danger, yet also that this was his chance to prove himself. He had studied the tracks all afternoon. The hoofprints were fresh, heading toward a narrow canyon that twisted like a serpent between the ridges. The rival band had likely stopped there for the night, setting up temporary tents to guard their stolen horses. He crouched behind a large rock, peering carefully at the entrance to the canyon. A small fire burned, and the shadows of several figures moved lazily around it. They were alert but relaxed, unaware that someone was watching. The stranger's mind raced. He knew he could not confront them head-on. That would be reckless. He had to think like the chief had instructed. Observe, plan, and act with precision. One wrong move could mean the loss of the horses, or worse, injury or capture. He checked his small supplies, making sure everything was secure and ready for quick use if necessary. Every movement had to be deliberate, every decision carefully considered. He remembered the chief's words from the camp: act with respect, act with intelligence, and let your choices guide you. The meaning of these words became clearer with each passing moment. Courage alone would not help him succeed. He needed patience, observation, and cleverness. The rival band might be strong, but they were also predictable. People always revealed small habits, small patterns that could be used to one's advantage if noticed carefully. He waited, crouched in the shadow as the rival band settled down for the evening. Their laughter and chatter drifted toward him, a mix of caution and overconfidence. The stranger studied them closely. He noticed which ones were asleep first, which ones stayed by the fire, and which seemed the most alert. He also observed how the horses were arranged. Some were tied in small groups, others left loose, grazing near the fire. These details would be crucial in planning his approach. Night fell quickly in the desert, bringing with it a cool breeze that carried the scent of dry grass and earth. The stranger moved carefully, using the shadows as cover. He kept low, avoiding the line of sight of anyone near the fire. The canyon was silent, except for the occasional soft sound of hooves and the distant howl of a coyote. Every sound seemed louder at night, every shadow more menacing. He reminded himself to stay calm, to think clearly, and to move with purpose. He reached a point where the horses were closer, their eyes glinting in the firelight. He slowed, observing the ropes and knots that bound the tied horses. He could see which ones were more skittish, which ones would resist, and which ones might be easier to lead away without causing a commotion. His mind worked quickly, creating a plan that relied on stealth, careful timing, and respect for the animals. Finally, he made his move. Moving like a shadow, he approached the closest horse, speaking softly to calm it. The animal shied at first, but gradually relaxed under his gentle words. He untied it quietly, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He repeated the process with the others, always aware of the rival band's presence and the slightest shift in their attention. He worked quickly but carefully, knowing that haste could ruin everything. As he led the horses away from the fire and toward the safety of the ridges, a twig snapped underfoot. One of the rival band members stirred, glancing in his direction. The stranger froze, holding his breath. The man did not move further, and after a tense moment, returned to his place by the fire. The stranger exhaled slowly, allowing the horses to follow him in silence. Every step was a test, every sound a potential warning. The desert night stretched on, quiet and vast, as he guided the horses through narrow paths between the ridges. He avoided the main trails, knowing they could be monitored. The moon rose, casting a silver glow over the sand, helping him see while also offering shadows for cover. He felt the weight of responsibility keenly. These horses were important to the Apache, and he could not afford to fail. Hours passed, and finally he saw the familiar outline of the Apache camp in the distance. Relief and pride surged within him, but he kept his focus. He approached slowly, keeping the horses calm and quiet. As he neared the camp, he noticed the chief watching from the ridge. Their eyes met briefly, and the stranger felt a surge of reassurance. The chief's calm, steady gaze seemed to guide him, a silent acknowledgement that the path he had taken was the right one. He entered the camp with the horses, moving carefully to avoid startling them or drawing unnecessary attention. The warriors noticed immediately, their eyes widening in surprise and respect. They had not expected him to succeed on his first attempt, and yet here he was, calm and in control, leading the horses back to safety. The chief stepped forward, his expression unreadable but his eyes gleaming with approval. "You have done well," he said quietly. not because of courage alone, but because of thought, patience, and respect. You have proven that your words are not empty. I. The stranger lowered his head slightly in respect. I only did what I could, he said softly. I wanted to show that I meant no harm and that I could act with care and intelligence. The chief nodded. Many men rush into danger thinking only of strength. Few stop to consider the consequences of each action or the lives affected. You have done more than retrieve horses. You have shown wisdom beyond your years and respect for life that cannot be taught. The warriors murmured among themselves, clearly impressed. Some nodded in approval, others in quiet awe. The stranger realized that respect had not been given lightly here. It had to be earned through careful thought, courage, and integrity. He had taken the first step, and it had not gone unnoticed. That night, the camp celebrated quietly. The stolen horses were returned to their places, and the people tended to their needs with a sense of relief. The stranger observed everything, noting how the community worked together, how each person had a role, and how trust and respect were intertwined in their daily lives. He felt a growing admiration for the chief and his people, understanding that this was a strength built over generations. As he sat by the fire, the chief approached him again. "Tonight, you rest," he said. "Tomorrow, your next trial begins. You have shown that you can act with care and intelligence. But courage is only one part of a man. The choices you make, the respect you show, and the understanding you gain will be tested further." The stranger nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and anticipation. He had completed the first task, but he understood that this was only the beginning. The chief's recognition was a gift, but it also carried responsibility. He could not become complacent, for the journey ahead would demand more than physical skill or bravery. It would require insight, patience, and a heart guided by honesty and respect. He lay down near the fire, the horses quietly resting nearby. The night was calm, and the stars sparkled above, a reminder of the vastness of the world and the smallness of any single man. Yet, he felt a sense of connection, both to the camp he had returned to and to the people he hoped to serve. Each lesson, each observation, and each action was shaping him into someone he had not yet been, someone stronger, wiser, and more aware of the responsibility that came with trust. Sleep came slowly, filled with thoughts of what was to come. The stranger dreamed of the desert paths he had crossed, of the horses he had guided, and of the chief's watchful eyes. He dreamed of challenges yet to face, knowing that each step forward would test not only his strength, but his mind and his heart. He awoke with the first light of dawn, ready to face whatever the chief and the desert had in store. By sunrise, he was already awake, preparing for the next stage of his journey. He checked his small supplies, reviewed the lessons of the previous night, and considered the chief's words carefully. Every decision he had made in the canyon had been deliberate, and every outcome had taught him something. He now understood that success required more than action. It required awareness, reflection, and the ability to adapt. As the camp stirred with morning activity, he felt a quiet determination settle over him. The first test had been passed, but the journey was far from over. He knew that challenges would grow greater, that the rival band might attempt to retaliate, and that the chief's expectations would continue to rise. Yet he also knew that he had earned a measure of respect, and that respect was a foundation upon which he could build further trust, understanding, and connection. He stood at the edge of the camp, looking out over the desert, the ridges, and the paths that led into unknown territory. The sun rose fully, casting golden light over the land, and he felt a sense of purpose he had not known before. Courage had brought him this far, but now wisdom, patience, and respect would guide him further. He stepped forward, ready for the trials ahead, and ready to prove himself not only to the chief and the camp, but to the man he was becoming. The morning sun warmed the desert as the stranger prepared for the next stage of his journey. The first task had been completed, yet he knew that real tests were never over with just one success. The chief's words echoed in his mind. Courage is only one part of a man. The choices you make, the respect you show, and the understanding you gain will be tested further. He understood that today he would face more than physical challenges. He would face choices that revealed who he truly was. He walked toward the edge of the camp where the chief was waiting. The chief's expression was calm, but there was an intensity in his eyes, a quiet evaluation that made the stranger feel both nervous and determined. "You have done well so far," the chief said, his voice steady and measured. "But it is not enough to act alone. A man must understand those around him, the land he walks upon, and the consequences of his decisions. Today you will learn this lesson." The stranger nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and anticipation. He did not fully know what the chief had in mind, but he was ready to face it. The chief gestured toward a narrow valley a few miles away. "A small group of travelers will pass through this area soon," he said. "They are not enemies, but their intentions are unclear. Observe them, speak if necessary, and guide them safely through. Your task is not to force them, but to protect both them and our people. The true test is not strength, but judgment and care." The stranger's heart beat faster. This task was different. It required not stealth alone, not bravery alone, but understanding, empathy, and wisdom. He could see that this would be a challenge not of action but of thought. He set off toward the valley, moving carefully, observing every detail of the land, the shadows, and the path ahead. The desert was alive with sounds he had not noticed before. The faint rustle of small animals, the whisper of the wind through rocks, and the distant cry of birds. Each sound reminded him to remain alert. After walking for nearly an hour, he spotted the travelers in the distance. There were 3 of them, 2 men and a woman, moving cautiously through the valley. Their faces were tense, and they seemed unsure of the terrain. They carried little, but their movements suggested they had faced difficulties before arriving here. The stranger watched them silently, noting their pace, their gestures, and the small signals they gave each other. He realized that this task required careful observation and delicate intervention. He approached them slowly, keeping to the shadows at first. When he was close enough, he stepped into the open, raising a hand in greeting. The travelers froze, their hands instinctively reaching for what little they carried, as if for protection. The stranger held his hands open, showing that he meant no harm. "Do not be afraid," he said calmly. "I am here to help guide you through safely. Follow my instructions, and no harm will come to you." The travelers exchanged glances, uncertainty in their eyes, but they nodded hesitantly. The stranger led them along a safe path through the valley, pointing out areas where the ground was uneven or where the shadows might conceal dangers. He spoke with patience and clarity, ensuring they understood every step. He felt the weight of responsibility keenly, knowing that one wrong word or action could cause panic or harm. As they walked, he observed the travelers closely. He noticed the small gestures that revealed their character. The way the woman supported the younger man, the way the older traveler moved with careful deliberation, and the quiet determination that all 3 displayed. He realized that understanding people required more than just words. It required attention, empathy, and the ability to anticipate their needs. They reached a narrow passage where the terrain became more dangerous. Loose rocks and steep drops made the journey treacherous. The stranger paused and instructed the travelers on how to proceed safely, demonstrating how to test the ground before stepping and how to maintain balance. They followed his guidance carefully, their trust in him growing with each step. Suddenly, a small rock slide occurred nearby, sending a cascade of stones tumbling down the slope. The travelers froze, but the stranger acted quickly. He positioned himself between the falling rocks and the group, guiding them to a safer area and calming their fear. His heart raced, but his mind remained focused. This moment tested his ability to act decisively while protecting others, a combination of courage, intelligence, and care. Once the danger passed, the travelers expressed gratitude, their initial fear replaced by respect. The stranger smiled briefly, but he knew the task was not yet complete. The journey through the valley continued, and with it, the need for vigilance, patience, and understanding. He maintained a careful watch, ensuring that no hidden dangers threatened the group, and that each step forward was deliberate and safe. As the sun climbed higher, they reached a small oasis, a rare sight in the desert. The travelers paused to drink and rest, and the stranger allowed them a moment of relief. He observed them, noting how they interacted, how they supported one another, and how their spirits seemed to lift with a small sense of safety. He realized that guiding them was not just about physical protection, but about understanding and nurturing trust. After a short rest, they continued their journey. The stranger remained alert, aware that the rival band might still be nearby, or that other dangers could arise. He used every skill he had learned, from stealth to observation, from patience to empathy, to guide the travelers safely. Each decision was a reflection of his judgment, each step a test of his understanding. By late afternoon, they approached the edge of the valley. The terrain leveled out and the path led toward open land where the travelers could safely continue on their way. The stranger paused, ensuring that they were ready to proceed without further assistance. He spoke to them quietly, offering guidance for the next stage of their journey. They listened attentively, their eyes filled with gratitude and trust. Before leaving, the travelers turned to him. "We are grateful," said the woman, her voice sincere. "You have protected us when we could not protect ourselves. We will not forget your help." The stranger nodded, feeling a quiet satisfaction. He had completed the task, but more importantly, he had demonstrated care, patience, and understanding, qualities that words alone could not convey. He watched them move on, disappearing into the distance. The sense of responsibility he had carried throughout the day began to ease, replaced by a growing understanding of what the chief had meant. Strength and courage were important, but so were judgment, empathy, and respect. True character was revealed not just in facing danger, but in how one guided and protected others along the way. As he returned to the Apache camp, the stranger reflected on the day's events. Each challenge had tested a different aspect of his character, and he had learned lessons that could not be taught through words alone. He understood that respect and trust were earned through actions, through careful observation, and through consistent, thoughtful choices. He also recognized that courage without wisdom could lead to failure, and that true bravery often required patience and restraint. The chief was waiting for him at the edge of the camp, observing silently. "How? What the hellawise?" The stranger approached, his steps steady but humble. "You have done well today," the chief said, his voice calm but approving. "You have shown that courage is not enough. Understanding, patience, and care are what define a man's true strength. You have guided others safely, protected life, and made choices that reflect honor. This is why you are being watched, and this is why respect is being considered for you." The stranger lowered his head slightly, feeling the weight of the chief's words. He had not acted for praise or recognition, but for the responsibility entrusted to him. Yet hearing acknowledgement from the chief reinforced the lessons he had learned, that action spoke louder than words, and that character was measured through consistency, judgment, and respect for others. The warriors of the camp gathered around, observing the exchange. They murmured among themselves, some nodding in approval, others quietly impressed. The stranger realized that respect was not given lightly in this place. It had to be earned through trials, careful observation, and thoughtful action. And with each passing moment, he felt that he was beginning to earn it. That night, as the camp settled and the desert became quiet under the stars, the stranger reflected on the journey so far. He had faced danger, uncertainty, and responsibility, and had learned lessons that would stay with him. He understood that the chief's tests were not just about survival or courage. They were about understanding himself, others, and the balance between action and thought. He lay near the fire, feeling the warmth against the cool desert night. The horses were nearby, resting peacefully, and the camp was calm. For the first time in many days, he allowed himself a quiet moment of reflection and gratitude. He had not only survived the challenges, but had grown through them, gaining wisdom, patience, and a deeper understanding of what it meant to act with integrity. As sleep came slowly, he thought of the chief's words, the travelers' faces, and the lessons of the desert. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, he knew, but he was no longer afraid. He had learned that courage alone was not enough, that strength needed guidance, and that true character revealed itself through actions, patience, and understanding. The path ahead was still uncertain, but he felt ready to face it, confident that he could continue to earn trust, respect, and his place among these people. The next morning, the desert was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of the rising sun. The stranger awoke with a sense of purpose and calm that had been absent from him before. He had survived the tests, guided travelers safely, and learned the importance of patience, judgment, and understanding. Yet he knew that the final step was still ahead, the moment when the chief would decide if he was truly worthy of trust, respect, and acceptance. The chief stood at the edge of the camp, his eyes steady and watchful. The stranger approached slowly, keeping his gaze lowered in respect. The chief's face was calm, but there was a sharpness in his eyes that reminded the stranger that nothing was given lightly. The morning wind carried the faint scent of sage and dry earth, and the camp was alive with the quiet movements of warriors, women, and children beginning their day. "You have done well," the chief said after a long silence, his voice firm but not unkind. "You have faced danger, guided others, and shown patience, care, and understanding. You have earned respect through your actions, not your words. Yet the final test is one of choice. It is not about what you do for yourself, but what you do for others, even when it comes at personal cost." The stranger listened carefully, his heart steady, but aware of the weight of responsibility in the chief's words. He had faced danger before, but now he understood that true strength was measured by more than survival. It was measured by selflessness, wisdom, and honor. The chief gestured toward a small group of young warriors practicing their skills nearby. "These men and women are the future of our people," he said. "Your task is to teach them something they do not yet know, not with force or dominance, but with patience, guidance, and example. Show them how to act with honor, courage, and intelligence. Only then will we see the full measure of your character." The stranger felt a mixture of pride and nervousness. He had guided travelers, but teaching others was a new challenge. He stepped forward, bowing slightly in respect, and began to observe the young warriors. They were skilled but inexperienced, and they made small mistakes that could lead to problems if not corrected. He realized that this task required both patience and humility. He could not force respect. He had to earn it through example. He began by demonstrating simple techniques, showing them how to move quietly, how to observe the land, and how to make decisions under pressure. He spoke slowly and clearly, ensuring that each instruction was understood. He encouraged questions, listened to their concerns, and offered guidance without criticism. He noticed the subtle differences in each warrior. Some were quick to learn, but impulsive, others cautious but thoughtful. He adjusted his teaching accordingly, tailoring his guidance to each individual. As the day progressed, he led the young warriors through practical exercises, creating scenarios that tested their judgment, courage, and teamwork. He watched closely, offering advice and corrections when needed, but always allowing them to make their own choices. When mistakes were made, he did not scold. Instead, he asked questions that guided them toward better decisions. The young warriors began to respond, their initial hesitation replaced by trust and engagement. By mid-afternoon, the stranger noticed a change. The warriors moved with more confidence, coordinating their actions, supporting one another, and demonstrating understanding of the lessons he had shared. He realized that the true measure of his success was not in his own skill, but in the growth and development of those he guided. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that he had helped others learn the value of patience, wisdom, and courage. The chief observed silently from a distance, his expression calm but attentive. He had seen the stranger's journey from the beginning, the bold approach to the camp, the careful recovery of the horses, the guidance of travelers through danger, and now the mentorship of the young warriors. Each step had revealed a deeper layer of character, a combination of courage, wisdom, and humility. The chief's respect for the man had grown with each passing day, and now he was ready to acknowledge it fully. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, the chief approached. The stranger paused, standing tall but humble, awaiting the chief's words. "You have shown strength, courage, and intelligence," the chief said. "But more importantly, you have shown wisdom, patience, and honor. You have guided others, protected life, and acted with care and integrity. These are the qualities that define a true warrior and a true member of our people." The stranger felt a warmth in his chest, a sense of validation and recognition he had not expected. He had not sought praise, yet the acknowledgement of the chief carried more weight than he could have imagined. He lowered his head in respect, grateful for the recognition and the lessons that had brought him to this moment. "You are welcome here," the chief continued, "not as a guest, but as one who has earned trust and respect. You have proven yourself through action, thought, and character. From this day forward, you are part of our community, bound not only by deeds, but by understanding, honor, and shared responsibility." The stranger's heart swelled with a mixture of pride, relief, and humility. He had come to the camp as a lone figure, weary and uncertain, seeking only a chance. Now he was accepted not because of words or bravado, but because of choices, actions, and integrity. He felt a connection to the people, to the land, and to the chief that went deeper than any simple acknowledgement could convey. The young warriors gathered around, their eyes filled with admiration and respect. They had seen his guidance, his patience, and his courage, and they now recognized him as a leader, a mentor, and an example. The stranger realized that trust and respect were not granted lightly in this place. They had to be earned through consistent, thoughtful, and honorable action. That evening, the camp celebrated quietly. Fires burned, and the people shared food and stories. Laughter filled the air, and the stranger felt a sense of belonging that he had never known before. He joined in the conversations, listened to the stories of the elders, and shared his own experiences with humility and honesty. He realized that he was no longer an outsider. He was part of something larger than himself, connected through respect, trust, and shared understanding. As night fell and the stars filled the sky, the chief approached the stranger one last time for the day. "Remember," he said quietly, "that acceptance is not an endpoint, but a beginning. The choices you make, the respect you show, and the actions you take will continue to define who you are. True character is not proven in a single moment, but in a lifetime of thoughtful and honorable decisions." The stranger nodded, understanding the depth of the chief's words. He had learned courage, patience, and wisdom, but he also understood that the journey was ongoing. Each day would bring new challenges, new decisions, and new opportunities to demonstrate integrity and honor. He felt ready to face them, strengthened by the lessons of the past and the trust he had earned. He lay near the fire, watching the flickering flames, and reflected on his journey. He thought of the moment he had first arrived at the camp, weary, worn, and desperate, shouting words that were bold but honest. He remembered the chief's calm, watchful gaze, the tense moments of observation, the tests of courage and judgment, and the guidance of those he had helped along the way. Each step had shaped him, teaching lessons that could not be learned alone or in haste. The desert night was calm, filled with the quiet sounds of life, hooves moving softly, wind brushing against rocks, and the distant calls of nocturnal animals. The stranger felt a sense of peace, knowing that he had earned his place through action, integrity, and care. He understood that acceptance was not given lightly, and that respect was a foundation for trust, responsibility, and shared purpose. As he drifted into sleep, he dreamed not of battles or dangers, but of connection, learning, and growth. He dreamed of the chief, the young warriors, and the travelers he had guided, realizing that each experience had shaped him into a stronger, wiser, and more thoughtful person. He understood that the lessons of courage, patience, and respect would guide him for the rest of his life. In the morning, the camp would awaken, and new challenges would arise, but the stranger no longer feared uncertainty or the unknown. He had been tested, guided, and recognized. He had learned that true courage was balanced by wisdom, that strength was guided by patience, and that honor was measured through consistent action. He felt ready for whatever lay ahead, confident in his ability to face it with integrity, humility, and determination. The chief watched from a distance as the stranger moved among the people, guiding, observing, and learning. There was a quiet pride in the chief's gaze, an acknowledgement that the man who had arrived as a lone, desperate figure had grown into someone worthy of trust and respect.